Hey guys, Crypto here with another video, and this is from Giant Freaking Robot, and Giant Freaking Robot, Chris Snellgrove, believes that it was the Solo movie that doomed Star Wars. The forgotten Disney decision that completely doomed Star Wars. Now this guy's coming from a certain angle, but I think there's even more to it from my perspective, and I'd like to just elaborate a little bit of that. So Solo was supposed to be a different movie. When Lord and Miller, and so that's Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, were announced as directors, it raised more than a few Star Wars fans' eyebrows, and that's because the pair were primarily known as the witty geniuses behind animated films such as Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and the Lego Movie. Since we'd never had a Star Wars movie explicitly designed as a comedy, it was a surprise when Disney hired these two funny guys to bring Han Solo's origin story to life. Eventually, the most predictable thing ever happened. Disney fired Lord and Miller over creative differences they had with others on the project, including legendary The Empire Strikes Back director Lawrence Kasdan. Okay, so Lawrence Kasdan did not direct The Empire Strikes Back. He was a writer. The Empire Strikes Back was directed by Kushner. As you can see here on Wikipedia, he is a writer on The Empire Strikes Back, not a director. He had written an appropriately serious script for Solo: A Star Wars Story, and reportedly didn't like the funny and improvisational direction these two directors were taking the movie. Now, I want you guys to remember that this is the same guy, I did a video about this a couple weeks ago, that was insisting that George Lucas kill off Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi. Like, think of how insane that would have been. Like, where would you even have gone from there? And then he wanted Han Solo to be killed in Return of the Jedi. And George also disagreed with that. And I actually don't think George would have killed off Han in Episode 7 either. He really wanted the whole family dynamic to be the main issue with the grandchildren, as he said to J.J. Abrams, plural, of Anakin. And then we also know he has said that Luke Skywalker doesn't get married and doesn't have kids in another interview. So that would mean that there'd be multiple children that were produced by Han and Leia, which you do see in the EU. You see Jason, Jaina, and Anakin. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a guy who sees Star Wars in a more serious note and was trying to make it more impactful, I guess, for the audience by killing off a main character. Of course, George was against that. So I can see how hiring these guys that are more into like the funny stuff was sort of a weird decision in the first place. If you're going to have the executive be Lawrence Kasdan and the writer be Lawrence Kasdan. And I mean, Kasdan has written some really good movies. I mean, he wrote Raiders. And there is humor in Indiana Jones. It's just a little bit different. Maybe maybe they were doing too much and trying to be too funny. But I'll tell you right now, the humor in Solo, when it finally came out, centered around a stupid way that he comes up with his last name and a stupid robot who's, basically a robot feminist, I guess.
If she doesn't want to fly, I'll be your co-pilot.
No.
She's definitely going.
Oh, why? Because you're my organic overlord?
Because I'm your captain. How about that?
And I guess he thought that was funny. But that's what a lot of the humor is in it. It's not really all that funny. So from that perspective, yeah, they were probably being funnier than he was. Because none of that stuff was really all that funny. It was mostly just lame. And this is also the guy who wrote The Force Awakens, which sucks, and the humor in that sucks too, really badly. It really does. It starts off not too bad with Finn and Rey and a little bit of stuff, and you kind of get the idea that there's a potential relationship there. But there's, when Han says to Finn, that's not how the Force works. When Finn says, we'll just use the Force or whatever.
We'll use the Force. That's not how the Force works.
Yeah, that was kind of funny, I guess. But not really all that funny. And Empire is not funny. It's not a funny movie. You could make light maybe of the Leia Han dynamic. There's some humor there, I think, for sure. But it's not a particularly funny film. So anyways, that makes sense. Okay. Lord and Miller were eventually replaced by Ron Howard, who was seen as a safe director to finish production of Han's first solo cinematic outing. So while I don't have the Force, I do have the power of hindsight, and it's easy to see Disney's unsurprising decision as one that effectively doomed the Star Wars franchise. Solo, despite being a fairly solid movie, ended up bombing, at least relative to its bloated budget, at the box office. Meanwhile, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller went on to write and produce the Spider-Verse movies, making a small fortune. Now, those movies, this is like the Miles Morales movies, those movies weren't particularly funny. There's a little bit of humor, but not much. At least from, like, I watched the first one with my kids. I'm pretty sure I watched the second one with my kids as well. That's the one where, like, all the different Spider-Men are chasing him, right? Or is that the first one? Pretty sure. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Either way, it wasn't funny, really. It was quite serious. So I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility that Lord and Miller could have done something with Solo that had some humor in it, but wasn't, you know, like a cartoonish, stupid style of humor. I also think that the Solo movie needed humor. Like I said, the funniness that's in it isn't really funny. It's more like lecturing funny, which isn't funny. Han Solo is funny. He's a funny character. And in the original trilogy, he's sort of he's funny in a lot of ways, right? The way he does things. Remember when he has to call down?
Everything's under control. Situation normal.
What happened?
Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
We're sending a squad up. Who is this? What's your operating number?
That was very funny. He's very funny, and his interactions with Chewie are very funny when they're arguing about the ship and stuff. So there needed to be lots of humor in Solo, in my opinion, more than in a regular Star Wars movie, because this is all focused on him. I mean, I can kind of see where this guy's coming from, that, you know, that this was a big mistake. Was it the biggest mistake? I don't know about that, but Sony superhero movies mostly have a negative reputation thanks to the awful quality films like Morbius, Craven, and Madame Web. But the Spider-Verse movies have been a major hit, and fans were counting down the minutes until we get to see the third film in the Miles Morales' epic animated trilogy. To me, this proves one thing. Lord and Miller had the chance to turn Star Wars around after backlash against The Last Jedi, and Disney firing the duo effectively doomed the studio's most beloved franchise. I don't know. I don't know that that's true. I think The Force Awakens was bad. And then I think The Last Jedi was just so bad. And again, it centers around, for most people, the most egregious thing in that movie. There are several, but the most egregious and the one that finally, you know, there's no way back from it, was what they did with Luke. There's no way to go back from that. The Holdo maneuver is awful. All that other stuff is awful. Don't get me wrong. But doing what they did to Luke meant there was literally no way you were ever going to have huge success again. Because what that meant for most of us, I think you guys in the comments would agree, is it showed a complete lack of care with the characters we care about the most. Whether that's Luke, Han, Leia, whatever. And Han and Leia were awful and estranged and just terrible what they did with them. But the Luke Skywalker thing was so egregious. That was it. I don't think if Solo had been funnier and maybe more entertaining that it would have saved anything. At that point, I think people were like, F you. Get rid of every single person involved with Star Wars that let that happen to Luke Skywalker. So I don't agree with that, but I do agree that I think, looking back, it's amazing to me the risks that they took with the lore, right? So they went with the high-end director, action guy in J.J. Abrams, who had already made some mistakes and really isn't a good sci-fi fantasy director, really. Well, certainly not a good sci-fi director with Star Wars, and then, you know, there's a sci-fi element in Star Wars. Sorry, I meant to say Star Trek, but there's a sci-fi element with Star Wars as well. It's not the main driver, but it's there, and you do need to adhere to the sort of laws of the universe, which he did not. But they played around with lore like no problem, like with Rey and how powerful she was and no training, and they didn't care about all that stuff. But they went the safe route with, I guess, in their mind, who they chose to make those films. And then Rian Johnson and what he did with Luke was a huge deviation. So they didn't seem to have a problem messing around with taking risks. So I'm really kind of surprised that they thought to remove these two dudes and bring in Ron Howard because it was less risky. And then envisioning what Kasdan wrote as being less risky when you're literally doing modern social politic stuff with this droid. It just didn't jive, and that wasn't funny, and that was supposed to be his funny character. It was awful. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't understand why they wouldn't have been willing to take the risk with these kids. The only thing I can say is it was just Lawrence Kasdan didn't want them around, and everybody, at the time thought Lawrence Kasdan was this genius because he wrote Empire. And it's important to remember too that Kasdan wasn't the writer like on his own. George Lucas wrote the initial story, and then Leah Brackett was brought on as the person to finalize the whole writing, and then she passed away, and so then he brought in Kasdan. But what's funny is that like Kasdan gets a lot of the focus from people, and people put him on a pedestal, in my opinion, because I think his ideas suck, and so I don't give Lawrence Kasdan the benefit of the doubt that he was the one who came up with some of the most amazing ideas in Empire. I mean, Vader being Luke's father was George Lucas's idea. And that's the scene. Like that scene essentially made Star Wars, if you think about it. Because if Empire had sucked, the brand would have been done. But Empire, that one scene, and it was so hidden and nobody knew anything about it. The actors, nobody. It was just completely hidden. And that was George Lucas's idea. And that propelled, Empire's the thing that propelled Star Wars into the stratosphere, right? Because after that, it was like, oh my gosh. And then Jedi, and there were some things people complained about with Jedi, but it still did well. The sequels, again, stuff people complained about in the sequels, but they still did well. And they were at least tenable. But I don't see Kasdan as like this genius that everybody else does. I don't get it. Yeah, he wrote some great stuff. I'm not sitting here saying he didn't, but he didn't do it all by himself either. And some of these movies weren't exactly like huge movies. Like Wyatt Earp was a big one, Bodyguard was a big one. There are some big ones in here. Don't I'm not saying he's not extremely experienced. But what I'm saying is I don't think he's necessarily like this godsend when it comes to Star Wars. With some of his ideas, like I said earlier, killing Luke, the droid was awful. There's a whole bunch of stuff that he's done that sucks in the Star Wars universe. And I think he gets way too much credit. Looking back, do I wish they would have just left Lord and... Yeah, I do. Honestly, I would have loved to have seen where they were coming from. And how much humor they put in there and what they would have done. Especially with Han and Chewie and all that stuff. Because what Kasdan put out sucked. It's generally accepted that one of the reasons Solo failed is that many fans were still annoyed by The Last Jedi, which made major changes to Luke Skywalker's character. That controversial sequel had come out only 5 months earlier and left a bad taste in fans' mouths, souring the Solo box office, given how successful Lord and Miller were at getting fans to show up for the Spider-Verse movies after Sony squandered its superhero street cred. I can't help but think their version of Solo could have brought disgruntled Star Wars fans back to the movie theater. Well, I will say this. I think if the movie had come out and word of mouth was that this was a good movie and funny and very Solo-ish and didn't have any lecturing, I do think word of mouth would have spread and the film would have done better, for sure. I like this idea that we're just going to blame it all on The Last Jedi. Solo sucks. It has some stupid stuff in it. People didn't like the movie in and of itself. I think even with what they did with Luke in The Last Jedi, if the Han Solo origin movie had been awesome and added to the Solo lore in a way that was really great and people and people agreed with it and it was more epic, and it is Han Solo, which is like a super popular character in Star Wars, one of the top few characters, right, popularity wise, I think it would have made some money. It wouldn't have saved Star Wars, but I think people would have been like, well, okay, it's an origin story, it's over here, it has nothing to do with The Last Jedi or Luke Skywalker. Yeah, it's good, therefore maybe I'll give this one a shot, but I'm still rejecting what they did over here with the sequels. I think there was a possibility there for that. But again, word of mouth spread about how crappy it was. And that was Lawrence Kasdan that did that. So yeah, I do kind of think, it wouldn't have saved Star Wars, but it might have sort of lifted it up a little bit, especially considering where it was at the time. Solo failed in part because after The Last Jedi, many fans worried that Star Wars had lost its old magic. With Lord and Miller's help, Disney could have released a funny Star Wars film that engaged sci-fi fans as much as Into the Spider-Verse engaged superhero fans. The other thing I would say about doing a funnier movie, maybe not a comedy, but a funnier Star Wars movie is, you might be able to bring in some new fans of just funny movies that aren't necessarily Star Wars fans, but they just like funny movies, and Han Solo is a funny character. I think Lawrence Kasdan is kind of stupid sometimes, man. Like, I'm sorry, but the more I'm learning about him, the more I'm like, I don't think this guy is who people think he is. Like, at least when it comes to Star Wars. If the comedic duo Solo had been successful and had great word-of-mouth buzz, Disney would likely have continued making the other character-centric films they had been planning, like Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, rather than later turning them into disappointing shows. The other thing that's really weird about this from the Disney executives' standpoint here is they all agreed to hire these two guys because of their background in doing funny stuff like Lego and this and that. So why did they allow Kasdan to push them out? I would love to have been a fly on the wall to hear that meeting or hear that phone call or whatever. Because that's what they wanted, clearly. You didn't hire those guys to make a super serious Empire Strikes Back type film. You hired them because they're funny and they know how to write jokes. And the jokes in your first two sequels did not hit at all. They were horrible. And so you hire this guy, or these two dudes who know how to write funny stuff, and they do. And clearly now with the Spider-Verse stuff, they obviously know how to write not funny stuff too. Why did they let Kasdan force them out and take over and do what he wanted? And I mean, Ron Howard was just there. He's just collecting a paycheck. He's just finishing it off, right? Doing some reshoots. I don't put him on in any kind of fault at all for the Solo movie, because that was well into production when he got there. And Kasdan clearly had a certain vision he wanted put through. So I think Howard just did his vision that he wanted, which is technically the director's job, right? That's a question I have, is why did the executives allow this when they clearly wanted a funny movie? Which, if you're going to do a funny movie, Solo's the guy to do it with. Really, if you think about it, of all the characters in the entire Star Wars universe, there's like, you could do a funny movie with him, and you could do a funny movie with probably R2 and C-3PO. And I'm drawing a blank, guys. Like, who else could you do a funny movie with? Is there anybody? So if you were gonna, like, and they always talk about, like, oh, we want to do different genres, right? That was Kathleen Kennedy's big thing. We want to do different genres, which I think is a mistake. I think you need to keep it with the same style of George's Star Wars, especially the OT. But you can branch off more into a more comedic thing and still keep the flavor of the action fantasy stuff. Tough to do that with The Acolyte, right? A style of television show. Tough to do that with Boba Fett. Like when Boba Fett's bouncing on the speeder, like they thought that was funny. That doesn't fit his character at all.
Like a panther. Yes.
So again, Solo was the opportunity, or R2 and C-3PO, I guess, too. And they've said, Kathleen Kennedy said, they want to branch off into different genres, which they have, which have failed. And yet you didn't do that with Solo and kick these two dudes out. And like, think about what we're talking about here. It just flies in the face of everything they say they want to do, and it ended up being crappy. It's just crazy to me. Like, what were they thinking? The failure of Solo was the beginning of the end. It showed that Star Wars could fail at the box office. That is true. That point is true. It showed that Star Wars could fail at the box office. Because even The Last Jedi made a lot of money. Even though it was a piece of crap. Rise of Skywalker, less so. It made less money. I think it did a bill, though, as well, didn't it? Yeah, it did like 1.2 or something, right? So Solo's the first Star Wars film that completely bombed. That made no money. It proved how many fans were hating the sequels and exiled many exciting film projects to the streaming hell of Disney+. Disney had a chance to let two of Hollywood's most reliable creators make a fresh and innovative film, the kind that the franchise had never seen before. Instead, Disney fired the two, and they went on to provide Sony with the Spider-Verse movies that became critical and commercial successes. If you look here, most of these are pretty successful, right? Like, they've made money. Whether you like them. I know some people don't like the Miles Morales Spider-Man. I actually didn't mind it. I mean, I thought they did a good job. The music was good. The style was kind of cool, the animation, and I didn't mind the story even. I know it rubs people the wrong way that people call him Spider-Man, whatever. I don't get caught up in that crap, but he isn't Spider-Man. He's Miles Morales. But they're still cool films. Like I said, I watched them with my kids. But if you look at these all made money. Lego Movie made a ton of money. I don't even know what that is, but like these movies all made money. Did any of these bomb? Storks. Maybe that one? You guys let me know in the comment section. I don't know anything about Brigsby Bear, but some of these I do, and they're successful. Ninjano, Mitchell's versus the Machines. I don't know if that one did any good either. But most of these made money. Cocaine Bear? I didn't know these were the guys that made Cocaine Bear. That's actually hilarious. So, the bottom line is why did you fire these guys? Fired its most revolutionary creators when Star Wars needed to change things up. We haven't had a new film in the franchise since 2019, so it's fair to say that Disney was wrong to play it safe with Solo and other franchise films. Unless they're willing to embrace their inner Han Solo and take bigger creative risks going forward, the franchise might disappear. Well, no, it's too late now. It doesn't matter. Unless they decanonize the sequels, well, and the shows now, for that matter, it doesn't matter. It's over. It's circling the bowl. It's just going to slowly, it'll be gone. I give it maybe 10 years. Or it'll still be around, but it's already becoming kind of just sort of another one of those IPs, right? It's no longer like seen as the big cultural iconic IP that it once was. It's just another IP now. They didn't even do a toy line for The Rise of Skywalker. The toy lines now essentially consist of collector toys. Like, there's action figures, but they don't sell. They end up at the dollar store or Ollie's or whatever. So it's just like any other generic franchise now. Is it going to be like PJ Masks and completely fade into oblivion? Maybe. I think Star Wars is a big enough brand, it'll just kind of hang around as like an also-ran for probably quite a while. But essentially, 10 years from now, no one's really going to care about Star Wars at all. I mean, a lot of people don't now. So do I agree with this? Kind of, yeah. I kind of agree. It wouldn't, in the sense that it wouldn't have saved Star Wars, but it might have been able to save the Solo movie itself, which might have been a springboard to doing a Boba Fett movie and people saying, well, Solo was good, we hate the sequels. They might have been able to create a little bit of a divide between the stuff in the timeline over here before the sequels and then the sequels themselves. They might have been able to kind of jive that. I mean, they did it with The Mandalorian, right? It was very successful the first couple of seasons. And we knew it was leading into the sequels, but people still embraced it for the most part. So I think there was that opportunity to have at least some success, whether it be moderate or great, in those spin-off, those side movies, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Boba Fett, and Solo, even with how bad the sequels are. I do. I think that was a possibility. I think, like I said, Mandalorian proves that. So I do think that it doomed Star Wars in the sense that the bar now is gone. It's totally wrecked. Whereas they could have at least had the spin-off movies viewed as positive. They could have, I think. And now nothing is viewed as positive. When you ask anyone, what do they say? They say, well, I liked The Mandalorian Season 1 and 2. Season 3 made no sense. And I kind of liked Andor. Right? That's it. That's all you get. You get I liked Mandalorian Season 2 and 1, and I liked Andor. That's it. Or you hate everything. I don't like Andor at all. But, that's it. All those other characters, shows, nobody likes them. So they did. So, you know what? This guy might be right. Chris Snellgrover might be right. If they had left those guys in there and made a funny Solo movie, man, that might have actually prepared the way for some good stuff. I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, that could have potentially happened. Yep. Anyways, guys, sorry for ranting so long, but let me know in the comment section what you think. If you like this content, please like, subscribe. It always helps the channel. Feel free to check out anything else on my channel. Have yourselves a really good day.